Mark, are you with us, sir?
I sure am.
Listen, let me tell you, I'm so delighted you've honored all of us by accepting our invitation to come and talk with us today about what happened last week, and what we can expect to happen tomorrow. But before you do that, I understand that you are a PDF file expert and that you've crawled over that phony birth certificate that...
Well, I'll tell you what my background is. I owned a typesetting company for 13 years. My colleague friend Paul Irie was a typesetter in New York and New Jersey for 50 years. I also own a company that we've written and also sold document imaging systems and scanners all over the world. So I knew both ends of the business, including what kind of an image should have come out of the Department of Health in Hawaii, which we didn't really get. I was the fifth witness during the trial. What happened in the trial, as you asked, the judge had called in the three lawyers, the two that came before Orly and then Orly, and since the president didn't send his lawyer, and for good reason, we could talk about that later, the judge says, I can give you a default judgment now, or do you want to present the evidence? And they all wanted to present the evidence so the general public can understand what had just happened. And so the first guy was presenting the natural-born citizen stuff, minor versus hapless. The second fellow was presenting, I think it was the false names, multiple names. And then Orly presented the Social Security information plus the fraudulent birth certificate. And my job was to go through whatever evidence there was for the certificate of live birth being a forgery. They only gave the first two lawyers 20 minutes each, and they gave Orly 2 hours. I think I was there only for about 15 minutes, and Orly just wanted me to answer the questions that she knew or she had prepared. But there's massively more. Paul and I have gone through his certificate. We now know exactly how the forger did it, why the haloing is around the type. It's a program within, or a subroutine within Photoshop called Unsharp Mask. And I know why he did it, but it's the evidence that computer manipulation was done on the certificate. It wasn't just on the PDF that the White House presented, but it was also on the reporter's copy that was given to them, a Xerox copy. And we actually saw the haloing around the lines on the left-hand side where the shading was.
Well, let me ask you, was this information, was this evidence presented during your brief testimony last week under questioning by Orly Tate?
Yeah, I covered the Unsharp Mask and also in the typewriter evidence, a typewriter does a couple of things very well. The leading is always going to be 1 pica, or 1/6 of an inch, or double space is 2 picas, and its escapement, the width of each letter is always going to be 6 points if it's typeface called elite. And that's the case. If you have on a line where the type does not, the letters don't line up within these boxes, it's usually an indication that the type was laid down by hand within Photoshop.
All right, okay.
The same thing's true for the lines also. They're all over the place. It's a bad forgery.
All right, and I think everybody knows that. And I had been planning a trial, and I'm now in some limbo about whether or not I'm going to go forward, since we've been able to get this far in a Georgia courtroom, whether or not it'll be necessary to demonstrate that the birth certificates were a forgery. And I suspect that the certificate of live birth obviously is a forgery as well. But what I want to ask you, you made mention of the fact that Mark Hatfield and the other attorneys were given 20 minutes each before the Judge Malee, and Orly was given 2 hours. Is there a reason for the differences in time given to the three attorneys that we think should be important to be heard here today?
Orly had more information that you wanted to present. The gentleman who presented the natural-born citizen section was able to comfortably do it within his time limit. He did a great job of presenting it. There's no question that by Obama's own admission on his birth certificate that his father was not a U.S. citizen.
Right. and that's been documented in dreams from my father as well. Now, where do we go from here? What's happening tomorrow? The judge has moved the date for either Obama to make an appearance or his attorney to make an appearance tomorrow to give an explanation, or he's going to make a ruling tomorrow. Will there be more testimony or evidence submitted on tomorrow?
Not that I know of. Orly may know more because she's the lead lawyer for our part of the case. We're involved with one. We feel we know whose certificate number the forgers within the Department of Health stole, and it was a Virginia Sonohara. And we're involved in a lawsuit in Hawaii for the relative to get a copy, a microfilm copy of her certificate. If we are managed to be able to get it, then it's all over with. And may I add also this? This isn't just a forgery case. What they've really done is high treason, because the person they gave the forgery for is the President of the United States, and
right.
And therefore it's under Section Title 18, Chapter 228, Section 3592, grave risk to national security. In the commission of the offense, the defendant knowingly created a grave risk of substantial danger to the national security. Nothing worse than getting a foreign agent as President of the United States. The section I've just read to you is under the mitigating factors whether the death sentence should be given. These people are painfully stupid.
How secure are you in your belief that we know whose birth certificate number was used in the forgery that these bumbling Keystone cops, well, I can't call them that, that's innocent,
no.
that these idiots used for forgery? How secure are you in that information?
100%. I'll explain why. It took me time to research it. The ones who are in charge of the certificates of live birth is now the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. They have a subdivision called the CDC, and under the CDC, it's called the Vital Statistics. There's been an act, the Vital Statistics Act, it actually goes back to 1909, I think, or 1906, and it basically told the states and the territories what they wanted on the birth certificates. I found it. It was a 1921 law, and it was later, a few years later, declared unconstitutional. But then the numbering system remained. That was under the Department of Labor. Then it got transferred over by the 40s to 1946 to the U.S. Department of Health. They clearly say the number is a sequential number starting from the beginning of the year. In other words, January 1 at 12:01 a.m., it would be a new number, starting from 1. If you know the total births in the state, and you divide that by the certificate number, you will get within a few days of when the registrar stamped it. I have good, correct certificates of live birth, and I'm within 1 to 2 days off. Obama's supposedly was stamped on the 8th of August. The Nordai twins were stamped on the alleged on the 11th, 3 days later. Technically, his number was 641. Theirs was 637 and 38.
Which is an impossibility.
Yeah, his number should actually be about 144 digits less. Now, this is important. Everybody should understand. They knew they had a problem with Obama's number. So what did they do? They flooded the market with like 4 or 5 other forgeries. I have several of them, and the numbers are either 28 days too early or 38 days too early. They try to confuse the issue of the certificate number because that's how important the number was. Unfortunately for them, I found the federal laws and regulations that it flat out says what it should be. In fact, the Social Security system tells their workers to find a fraud certificate if you have a high number in the beginning of the year, chances are it's a forgery. or if it's a low number at the end of the year, the chance of a forgery. So they outfox themselves, but it's blatantly
well, you know,
it's wrong by so many ways.
I'm amazed that they have made so many mistakes in this process, and
May I add?
because you would think that making forged documents that the CIA or others or anyone would be better trained at what they have done than what they have done.
I'm going to say something important that I've come to this conclusion. I think Paul Irie agrees with me now. Even the certificate number, what we didn't know when I first wrote the papers is that the registrar's stamp and the date stamp are not rubber stamps. They are metal embossed stamps. I have 3 original copies we got from Virginia, so I know this for a fact. What was interesting is that on the steel we have, it's like point size 7 on 5.5. There was almost no leading between the 3 lines of type on the registrar's stamp. On Obama's, it's 7 on 8, so it looks like about 2 points extra. On one of the other forgeries, the space between the first and the second line has got 2 points of extra space. The second and third line, it's no space. But it's no way that a legitimate stamping house who makes metal stamps would make mistakes like this, nor would they ever put a TX in, or that italics E over the A or an Alvin. Now, what I'm going to tell you is really important. Of all the mistakes we see in this thing, typewriter leading, the number, the date, everything, we came to the conclusion that the forger was an employee of the Department of Health, most likely in the graphics art department. We know it was done on a Macintosh. That person did not want to do what he was doing. Now, it could be a woman. I'm just using the word he, but it could be a female also. And what they did is they deliberately put 2 major errors in Onaga's seal, the italics E over the A and the TXE. Like they say, X marks the spot.
Right.
They're basically saying he's the guy who forced me to do this. Now, it doesn't relieve him of the fact he's committed treason. He could have gotten up and walked out and said, forget it. He didn't do that. What he did is he kept his job, and he did it anyway. But the forger may actually be the hero.
Well, let me ask you.
I'm not kidding.
Let me ask you one other question, and I don't want to lose that train of thought. I think it's very interesting how you have been able to document all of this. But would not someone that would be opposed to Obama have had similar skills as what you have presented and would have been able to do the same thing? I mean, surely, if not nationally, then internationally, and would come to the same conclusion that you've come to.
You're getting to the point of how come of the 2,000 or 3,000 forensic examiners, they haven't come forward. One or two did come forward and told people we know and said basically they have government contracts and they don't want to lose those government contracts.
But so we're talking about treason here.
But they looked at it and said, yeah, it's a forgery. But the other issue is this. Most of these guys are trained to only deal with it. They have a physical piece of paper in their hand. That's not the case here. We had an image. They don't have the background of knowing scanners, what they can do, about document imaging, what it should look like when it's printed out, nor 13 years or 50 years in typesetting. Like, for instance, the forger couldn't possibly typeset the form from scratch because the original form was done on hot metal on a linotype machine. The typeface of the body of the text was Cheltenham book, and the top part was Futura. That's a cut you'd never find. You can't find it today. So they're stuck. They had to wind up taking either microfilm copies or originals that the Department of Health gave them and made the forgeries from that. They're stuck.
You are assuming now that the person who actually put this document together did not want to do it and has left a sign to indicate that they did do it under protest and duress, perhaps, albeit they could have walked out and not participated at all. So,
right. I'll give you another example. I mentioned unsharp masking. It's a feature that's only in Photoshop under the tools area. Now, what it does is basically remove pixels from both sides of any black lines or lines. Now, you don't do that unless you're trying to sharpen the thing up. What the forger didn't realize, or did it deliberately, is that the scan was a grayscale scan put into the document imaging system in the Board of Health. When they print it out on a piece of paper, on the security paper, you should see, it's a grayscale. The only way a laser printer can print it out if it does a screen of either 80 or 120 lines per inch. That's the only way it can do it. Now, he evidently didn't like the screening, the dots around all the type. So he may have used the unsharp mask to sharpen it up. But he was wrong. He should have left it the way it was, and it would have been what it should be. Either he didn't know this, or he did it deliberately. But there's just too many mistakes. We know he knew about the grid pattern. By the way, the grid pattern on typewriter frauds is mentioned by the FBI forensics exams and stuff like that. We have one of their papers. This is a very common procedure that is done. So he knew about the grid pattern, but he goofed on the right-hand side of the thing. It's generally off 1 to 2 points. And the leading, anybody who's done typewriter work, who know about manual typewriters, electric typewriters, they know the leading will be perfect every time. We even did an example of a whole page of A's, and all of them fit perfectly, 30 or 35 lines down, and 50 or 60 characters across or more.
Absolutely fascinating.
And
let me ask you
one
this
of the
question.
things you find
this
to
question
find
is
the
burning
forgery.
with me, Doug.
We have it proves both electronic manipulation, the typewriter evidence, the certificate number, and the registrar stamp is a fraud. So we know it too many ways. And to answer your other question, yes, Paul and I are finishing up a final report that'll have all of this stuff. It's mind-blowing that this thing happened. The stupid fools at the Department of Health, including those responsible and principals of this thing, if it's finally proven it's a forgery, then it's a treason case, and these people have bought themselves the death sentence.
Here, give my regards to Paul. He communicates with me all the time, and maybe I'll have him on the Manning Report. But now, was this same amount of information you just presented to me, presented to Judge Malihi last week, and does he know the scope of what is in his hands at present? Do you get the sense that he fully knows just how high on the criminal scale this matter goes?
No, it was never mentioned. And remember, I had to answer the questions that orally asked. That was all. Because it was a foregone conclusion what we're going to be doing. Gave us 2 hours. She wanted to have enough time to have her conclusion. And that's it. We were, I was prepared for testifying for 2 hours if I had to cross-examine. But that wasn't going to happen here. The reason, let me explain. The reason why the president didn't send any lawyer, because the lawyer must have read what I have and what Paul had. I know they were on my website. I have tracking on it. And they realized they couldn't disprove me. They were stuck. If they went to trial and they lost at the trial, then it would be a cascade. I mean, you'd say, oh, my God, he lost at a trial. He did the best he could, and he couldn't prove it, that it's a fraud? I mean, you see, understand the problem?
Yes, absolutely.
They would be stuck. They couldn't afford to go to trial.
Well, what do you think is going to happen now? I mean, we can wait until tomorrow and find out, but I'm anxious to know, what's your read on Judge Malihi, and is he fully recognizing just what he'll be ruling on tomorrow?
I think he does. He's an administrative judge. He sends the recommendation to the Attorney General, the Secretary of State, I think, runs the elections in that state, like in this state. We're in Washington State. And it's obviously going to come down to a political decision. But the evidence is overwhelming. Even though she did not present all of the evidence, she has my earlier affidavit. She may have, I think she added some of the stuff that Paul had, but what I've written here with Paul's stuff and additional stuff that I found, I mean, I have like 5 different examples of kerning 2-letter pairs. It just doesn't make any sense. It cannot be there except if the type was laid down. But things like that wouldn't be there. It would probably overwhelm the poor judge anyway. I mean, they know the law for his own state, but knowing how many lawyers will wind up being taught about Title 18 and the treason section?
Yes.
There's no reason for them to learn it.
Yes.
None whatsoever. I came across it, and that's how I did it. My first paper, I said misprision of felony. And I got curious about, okay, when did this law first get adopted? It was passed by the very first Congress, second session, and signed into law by George Washington. Misprision of felony, misprision of treason, accessory after the fact, all three of them. That's how important the Founding Fathers thought. And why? Because that experience with traitors like Benedict Arnold, they wanted to make sure if someone knew that someone had committed treason, they had to wind up tell. If you don't tell what it actually says in that law, first the president and then federal judges. Well, the president's out of the can, no chance of him because he's the guilty party. So you're supposed to tell federal judges. If you knew, like people in the Secret Service, if they knew that this guy doesn't have a birth certificate and they'll say nothing, they can get 7 years in prison and a fine. That's what misprision of treason says. And they deserve it, too.
Oh, absolutely. Now, tomorrow you stated that it's going to come down to a political decision. I believe that it will as well, and will get negotiated from there. I had been contemplating the kind of evidence that you have presented to actually hold a trial, something similar to what we did back in 2010 with the CIA, Columbia, Obama sedition, and treason trial regarding Obama's not having attended Columbia University, and there was no evidence to support that he did, and he was found guilty of 17 counts. My question is as to whether or not you're probably not going to be able to answer that question, and I should table it because tomorrow we'll have to see how the judge rules and then what happens politically after that before I continue to proceed further. But you have given us a wealth of evidence here today regarding this Obama's forgeries. I'm awfully curious as to why no one has come forward. You're right. There is misprision of felony and treason, and there are penalties for doing so. Maybe one of the reasons why people
most people don't know these sections at all. They don't know them. I mean, lawyers wouldn't be learning this in school. There's no reason. They learn contract law, family law, commerce, or tax law. They don't go into treason cases. Not that many lawyers specialize in these kind of crimes.
We have 2 minutes. We have 1 minute left. I'm sorry. We have 1 minute left, Doug. Where do we go from here? What do we do now?
Well, we're dealing with the case in Hawaii, and I always felt that was the best chance. We have both federal and state laws that says that the relative has a right to get a copy of the sister's certificate of live birth, and the state will try. My trick is to prove that the Department of Health themselves have been perpetrating the forgeries, and I think we have enough now to do it, to prove it. Whether the legal system and the judges in Hawaii are honest or are they intellectually corrupted or politically corrupted is another issue, and Orley would say they're just politically corrupted. We'll find out real soon. Basically, the problem with the Department of Health is they renamed the abstract of the short form, they call it now the long form, but they legally did not have the right to do that, both administratively in the state of Hawaii nor federally.
Well, Orley has been given leave.
They may have finally figured out that the crime that they've committed, if they don't cover it up and stonewall it, they're going to go not just to prison, they may go to the gallows.
Orley has been able to get a leave from Judge Malihi to appeal to the Superior Court of Georgia to make a request from the court in Hawaii regarding that very same issue you just made mention of. It just happened today. I'd be interested to see how that's all going to develop, whether that becomes a political issue as well. But listen, it's always very interesting to talk to you. We appreciate the work that you've done. You're probably one of 7 billion people with the kind of knowledge you have presented. But the way you've presented it made it so simple and has clearly demonstrated these people are bumbling idiots, but they're going to go to jail, and you're right, very possibly to the gallows as well. Listen, again, thank you very much. Give my regards to Paul and tell him I'm going to give him a call and tell him to please continue to fill me with the information he's sending me. It's always quite informative. All right, everybody, that was Doug Vogt. You heard that. I guess you got an earful on that one. fascinating, the research he has been able to do. And I'll know tomorrow whether or not I'm going to proceed with the trial that we have demonstrated that the birth certificates are forgery and certificate of live birth as well. He has certainly laid it all out there for us in terms of documented evidence. We'll see what the decision is tomorrow, and we'll make our decision shortly thereafter. You're listening to The Manning Report, everybody.